3 weeks before her aunt was set to pass away, Gabrielle Sterling arrived at the house an hour earlier than planned, and what she witnessed in that room changed everything she thought she knew about love. But first, you have to understand who Gabrielle was. 47 years old, the CEO of Sterling Hotels, a chain of 12 boutique hotels that generated $340 million a year. She wore designer suits that cost more than her housekeeper's monthly salary, drove a black Mercedes S-Class that gleamed like a mirror under the Beverly Hills sun, and she visited her Aunt Beatrice for exactly 20 minutes every week. Sundays at 11 a.m., not a minute more, not a minute less, because Gabrielle Sterling knew how to manage her time. 168 hours a week, 20 minutes for Aunt Beatrice, the rest to build an empire. If you've ever felt like time is slipping through your fingers, that the people you love deserve more, but your schedule says no, then you know exactly who Gabrielle was. But she didn't know who her aunt was. Not anymore. Beatrice Sterling, 68 years old, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors had given her 3 months back in May. Now it was August. Every day was borrowed time, every breath a gift no one asked for, but everyone feared losing. But here's what Gabrielle never knew. Beatrice wasn't always that frail 100-pound woman who couldn't get out of bed anymore. There was a time when Beatrice Sterling could make 1,000 people hold their breath just by moving. Principal dancer for the National Ballet Company for 22 years, Giselle, Sleeping Beauty, Swan Lake, standing ovations at the Lincoln Center, the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, even the Kennedy Center in Washington. And her hair, God, her hair, black as a raven's wing, long down to her waist. She braided it into elaborate buns that looked like sculptures, spending an hour every morning just styling it, because Beatrice Sterling had built her identity on 2 things, the grace of her body and the beauty of her face, until cancer took them both away. She lost 40 pounds in 3 months. Her body, which had commanded the stage with the precision of a Swiss watch, now trembled just to lift a glass of water. Her hair started falling out in clumps, first a few, then more, then pillows full every morning. And one night, alone in her room, Beatrice broke the hand mirror she'd used for 40 years. She smashed it against the wall because she couldn't bear to see what she had become. Gabrielle never knew that, because Gabrielle only came for 20 minutes on Sundays. But here comes the twist that no one expected, and it's at this moment, 10% into this story, when you have to pay attention, because what comes next, you won't see coming. 3 months before that August morning, Gabrielle had hired a housekeeper, Dolores Lola Rodriguez, 52 years old, tired face but kind eyes, always wearing a navy blue uniform with a spotless white apron. She arrived at 6 a.m., left at 6 p.m., cleaning, cooking, organizing, efficient, silent, perfect. Gabrielle had interviewed 12 candidates. Lola was the only one who didn't ask about salary. She only asked one thing. Her aunt, Mrs. Beatrice, how much time does she have left? 2 to 4 weeks. Gabrielle had said, repeating the doctor's words as if they were the weather forecast. Lola had nodded. Very well, I'll take care of it. And Gabrielle, relieved to delegate one more burden, had said yes. But she didn't know what taking care of it meant to Lola. For the first 2 months, Lola did exactly as expected. Cleaning the 5-bedroom house from top to bottom, preparing light meals for Beatrice, chicken noodle soup, applesauce, chamomile tea, changing the sheets, organizing the medications, 11 pills in the morning, 8 in the afternoon, fentanyl patches every 72 hours for the pain, efficient, silent, perfect. But there was something Gabrielle started to notice. Small things. Details that didn't quite fit. If this story is stirring something inside you, something you didn't know you could still feel, then stay. Because what's coming is the part that's going to break you. One Sunday, Gabrielle arrived at 11 a.m. as usual. She walked into Beatrice's room. Her aunt was awake, staring at the ceiling, but there was something different. The room smelled like lavender, not the medicinal hospital smell that had dominated those last few months, not of disinfectant or sickness, but fresh lavender, as if someone had brought a rose garden inside. And there was music, soft, so low you could barely hear it, but it was Tchaikovsky, the Nutcracker. The same ballet Beatrice had danced 40 times in her career. "Who put this on?" Gabrielle had asked. Beatrice only moved her eyes toward the door. "Lola," she whispered. Gabrielle didn't think much of it. Maybe Lola had found some old CD. Maybe it was a coincidence. But 2 weeks later, Gabrielle noticed something else. Beatrice was asking for less morphine. The night nurse had called, confused. Mrs. Sterling used to ask for morphine every 3 hours for the pain. Now she only asks every 6. In the mornings, she hardly asks for any. Has something changed? Gabrielle didn't know. She called the doctor. The doctor didn't know either. Stage 4. Pancreatic cancer doesn't get better. It only gets worse. But the numbers didn't lie. Beatrice was using 40% less pain medication than the month before, and she was sleeping better. The night nurses reported that Beatrice was sleeping for periods of 4 or 5 hours straight, something that hadn't happened in months. What was happening? Gabrielle decided to find out. And here, 15% into this story, is where you have to make a decision. If this story is touching your soul, if you feel there's something here that you need to hear until the end, consider supporting this work, because stories like this don't tell themselves. Someone has to decide it's worth the time. And if you feel it's worth it, show it. Super Thanks is there for a reason. One Tuesday morning, Gabrielle cancelled her 9 a.m. meeting, something she never did. She drove to the house in Beverly Hills where Beatrice lived, arriving at 7 a.m. instead of her usual Sunday at 11. And what she saw when she walked in left her completely still. The living room was spotless as always, but there were fresh flowers in the vase by the entrance, gardenias, Beatrice's favorites when she was dancing. Gabrielle hadn't bought them, didn't even know where to get them, and she could hear voices, very soft, from Beatrice's room. Gabrielle went upstairs quietly, not wanting to interrupt, just wanting to understand. The door was ajar. She peeked in just a little, and what she saw froze her blood. Lola was sitting on the edge of the bed. But she wasn't cleaning. She wasn't organizing medicine. She wasn't doing anything a housekeeper normally does. She was reading, out loud, an old book with worn covers. And Beatrice was awake, watching her, with an expression Gabrielle hadn't seen in months. Peace. Lola read slowly, carefully, as if each word mattered, as if she had all the time in the world. And between paragraphs, she paused. She asked Beatrice, "Would you like me to continue? Or would you prefer we stop here?" And Beatrice, with that faint voice that barely came out, whispered, "Continue, please, continue." Gabrielle stood there, frozen in the hallway, watching her housekeeper do something that she, with all her millions, had never done: give her aunt time. Not 20 minutes measured with a stopwatch. Not a mandatory visit squeezed between meetings and calls. Real time, complete attention, presence. And in that moment, Gabrielle felt something she hadn't felt in years: shame, because a woman she paid $800 a month knew her aunt better than she did. But here's what Gabrielle didn't know yet, and what you don't know yet either. That reading scene wasn't everything. It wasn't even the most important thing, because what Lola was doing every morning, an hour before her official shift started, an hour she wasn't paid for, was something that would shatter everything Gabrielle believed about love, duty, and dignity. But to understand that, you have to know who Lola really was. Dolores Lola Rodriguez, 52 years old, mother of 3 grown children, a widow for 12 years. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in a suburb of Los Angeles she shared with her youngest daughter and 2 grandchildren. But that was now before. Lola had been someone else for 15 years. Lola had been a nursing assistant at County General Hospital, specializing in palliative care, the section where terminal patients go, those who can no longer be cured, only given dignity. 15 years watching people die, some in peace, others in agony, some surrounded by family, others completely alone. And Lola had learned something that no medical manual teaches, that the way you die matters as much as the way you live. But in 2018, Lola had quit after 15 years. And why? Because one night in December, her own mother had died in that same hospital. Stage 4 breast cancer. The doctors and nurses had followed every protocol, medicine, morphine, monitoring, but no one had combed her hair. Her mother, who all her life had been vain about her hair, who never went out without doing her hair, had spent her last 3 weeks with her hair tangled, unwashed, strewn across the pillow like a grey spiderweb. And Lola, who worked in that same hospital, had been too busy with other patients to notice until it was too late. The day her mother died, Lola had been left alone with the body, and the first thing she did, before calling anyone, before doing paperwork, before everything, was grab a brush, and she combed her mother's hair. For 40 minutes she combed that grey, tangled hair until it was soft and presentable, until her mother looked how she would have wanted to look. And while she combed, Lola had made a promise: never again will I let someone die without dignity. That's why she had quit the hospital, because the system doesn't let you give time. It lets you give medicine, but not time. And that's why, when she saw Gabrielle's ad looking for a housekeeper to care for a terminal patient, Lola didn't ask about the salary. She asked how much time Beatrice had left, because Lola wasn't looking for a job. She was looking for an opportunity to fulfill her promise. And every morning, for the past 3 months, Lola arrived at 6 a.m., but started working at 5 a.m. That hour, no one paid her for. That hour, Gabrielle never knew existed. That hour was for Beatrice. And here, 20% into this story, appears the first object, the first detail that will change everything. A silver brush, not just any brush. An antique brush with a handle of carved silver and natural boar bristles. Engraved on the handle, a date, December 15th, 1942. It was Lola's mother's brush, the only inheritance she had left her. And every morning, Lola brought it wrapped in a blue silk scarf. And with that brush, with infinite care, she combed Beatrice's thinning hair. Beatrice, who had refused to look in the mirror for 2 months. Beatrice, who had broken her hand mirror because she could no longer stand her reflection. Beatrice, who had told the nurses to stop combing her hair because it no longer mattered. There was nothing left to save. That Beatrice, every morning at 5 a.m. He felt Lola's hands lift her head gently, felt the bristles of the silver brush move softly through the strands that remained, felt someone treat her not as terminal patient number 47 on a medication list, but as Beatrice Sterling, ballerina, woman, human. And little by little, something in Beatrice began to change. Not her cancer. The cancer was still there, growing, killing her slowly. That didn't change. But her soul began to heal. And that, no one can measure in X-rays, but it's real, more real than any number in a medical chart. Gabrielle knew nothing about this yet, but she was about to find out. And when she did, 47 years of certainties about what success, love, and value meant were going to collapse in seconds. But that comes later, because now, standing in that hallway, spying on her housekeeper reading to her aunt, Gabrielle only felt one thing: curiosity. What else was happening in that house that she didn't know? And more importantly, why hadn't anyone told her? She decided to stay. She cancelled all her meetings for the day, something she had never done in 15 years as CEO, and she sat in the living room downstairs in silence, waiting, observing, wanting to understand what the heck was going on under her own roof. and what she discovered in the following hours would change her forever. At 8 a.m., Lola left Beatrice's room. She closed the door carefully, as if not wanting to wake someone who was sleeping even though Beatrice was awake, and went downstairs to the kitchen and came face to face with Gabriel for 3 full seconds. Neither of them said anything. They just looked at each other, Lola with that calm expression she always had, Gabriel with a mixture of curiosity and something else she couldn't quite name yet, until Gabriel broke the silence. "Do you arrive early?" Lola nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Sterling, an hour early, for the past 3 months. Do I pay you for that hour?" "No, Mrs. Sterling." "Then why do you do it?" And here comes the moment, exactly 25% into this story, where everything begins to reveal itself, and you really have to pay attention, because what Lola said wasn't just an explanation. It was a philosophy, because her Aunt Beatrice deserves more than she can pay for. That answer, 6 words, shattered something in Gabrielle that she didn't even know was broken. Because she deserves more than she can pay for meant something that no one had ever said to Gabrielle Sterling, CEO of 12 Sterling hotels, in her entire professional life. It meant that money wasn't enough, that there were things that money couldn't buy, that her aunt, dying in a bed, needed something that didn't appear on any invoice, and Lola was giving it for free. Gabrielle sat down. "Please, tell me, what do you do during that hour?" And Lola, after hesitating for just a second, began to speak. "I wash her hair with lavender shampoo because she likes it. I dry it with warm towels that I heat up in the dryer first. I comb it with my silver brush, the one that belonged to my mother. I put on music, her favorite ballets. I read to her, whatever she asks. Sometimes it's 10 pages, sometimes only 2 because she gets tired. I show her the mirror. She doesn't always want to see herself, but when she does, I hold the mirror and say, 'Look how beautiful you look, Miss Beatrice.' And sometimes she cries, and sometimes she smiles, but always she squeezes my hand. And that tells me that she needed it." Gabrielle had become completely still. Each word was like a knife, a real knife. Why did you never tell me?" "Because you never asked, ma'am." And there it was, the truth so simple that it hurt. Gabrielle came for 20 minutes on Sundays, asked, "How are you?" "Fine, ma'am." "Do you need anything?" "No, ma'am." "Perfect." And she left. She never asked how Beatrice really was. Never asked what Lola did during those 12 hours of work. Never asked anything that required more than 20 minutes to answer. Because Gabrielle knew how to manage her time, but she didn't know how to give her time. And that difference between managing and giving was the difference between surviving and living. Gabrielle swallowed hard. Can I see?" Lola nodded. "Tomorrow. Come at 5 a.m. I'll show you." Dee and Gabrielle, for the first time in 15 years as CEO, said yes to something without checking her schedule first. That night, Gabrielle didn't sleep. She couldn't. Her head was a chaos of thoughts that wouldn't leave her alone. Her aunt was dying. She had known that since May. 3 months prognosis. It had already been 3 months. Every extra day was borrowed time. But never, in those 3 months, had Gabrielle spent more than 20 minutes with her. Why? "Because it's painful," she told herself that night. "Because I don't know what to say. Because seeing her like that breaks me. Because it's easier to delegate, to pay someone to take care of her, so that I don't have to see." But that night, lying in her bed of Italian sheets in her 4,000 square foot penthouse, Gabrielle understood something. She wasn't protecting Beatrice from her pain. She was protecting herself, because it was easier to send checks than to give hugs. Easier to hire nurses than to hold hands. Easier to pay than to be present. And a woman who earned $2,000 a month was teaching her that lesson without saying a word, just by arriving 1 hour early every day for 3 months, without charging an extra dollar. The next day, Gabrielle arrived at 5 a.m. It was still dark. The city was barely waking up, but the light in Beatrice's room was already on. And inside, Lola was already there. Gabrielle knocked softly. Lola opened the door, and without saying a word, she stepped aside, a silent invitation. Gabrielle entered, and what she saw made her understand why Beatrice was asking for less morphine in the mornings. Beatrice was sitting up, propped up on pillows, fragile, thin, but awake. And Lola was standing next to her with a pitcher of warm water, a towel, and that silver brush. Gabrielle sat down on the couch in the corner, silent, just observing. Lola wet Beatrice's hair carefully, strand by strand, using warm water that wouldn't burn. She applied shampoo, the lavender one, with circular motions on the scalp, massaging, gently, as if she had all the time in the world. Beatrice closed her eyes, not from pain, from relief. "How long has it been since someone washed your hair like this?" Lola asked softly. Beatrice opened her eyes, thought, 2 months, since I rejected chemotherapy. I didn't want anyone to touch me anymore. But you let me, because you touch me like a human, not like a patient." And Gabrielle, sitting in that corner, understood something she had never seen before. Dignity isn't what doctors give you. Dignity is how people treat you. Lola rinsed the hair with clean water 3 times, until there was no trace of shampoo left. She wrapped it in a warm towel and pressed gently to dry without rubbing. Then she let it fall over Beatrice's shoulders and took the silver brush. And here, 35% of the way through this story, you have to answer something. And answer with the truth. Not with what you think you should feel, with what you actually feel. If you were dying, who would you want to take care of you? Someone efficient who does their job and leaves? Or someone who arrives an hour early just because they care? Think about it, really. Because someday, you or someone you love is going to be in that bed. And that day, you're going to want there to be a Lola in the world. Someone who sees beyond the diagnosis, who sees the person. And if this story makes you feel something, if it makes you think of someone, if it makes you want to be that person for someone else, then don't just listen. Act, because the world doesn't need more people who feel. It needs people who do. Lola combed, strand by strand, slowly, with that silver brush that had combed her own mother's hair before she died. And while she combed, she sang softly, almost a whisper, the music of the Nutcracker, the same music that Beatrice had danced to 40 times, the same music that had defined 22 years of her life. And Beatrice, with her eyes closed, began to move her fingers. Gabrielle noticed it. Beatrice's fingers were moving in the air, following the rhythm, as if she was marking the steps that her body could no longer dance, but her soul was still dancing. And Lola knew it. That's why she put on that music, not to remind her of what she lost, but to remind her of who she was, a dancer, always. When Lola finished combing, she took something from the nightstand, and Gabrielle saw what it was, a mirror, the same mirror that Beatrice had broken 2 months ago. Lola had picked it up, had it repaired, and brought it every morning. "Do you want to see yourself?" Lola asked. Beatrice hesitated. 3 seconds, 5, 10. Then she nodded. Lola held the mirror in front of her, and Beatrice saw herself, really saw herself. Maybe for the first time in months. She didn't see the cancer, and she didn't see the 40-pound weight loss. She didn't see death approaching. She saw Beatrice Sterling, combed, clean, dignified, and she smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was small, fragile, like everything else about her now, but it was real, and Gabrielle, seated in that corner, began to cry. She wept silently, without making a sound, because she didn't want to interrupt. But she cried so hard inside, she felt like she was going to break. She cried because for 3 months, she had seen her aunt as a terminal case, a problem to delegate, a burden to manage. and Lola had seen her as Beatrice, and that difference between a case and a person was the difference between existing and living. Afterward, Lola put the mirror away. Lola tucked the brush into her blue silk handkerchief, and she asked Beatrice, "Would you like me to read to you?" "Yes, please." "Which book?" "The usual one." Lola pulled a book from her bag, worn, with dog-eared corners, and Gabrielle saw the title, The Little Prince, a children's book, a book that everyone knows, but few understand. "Why that book?" Gabrielle asked softly. Lola looked at Beatrice. Beatrice smiled weakly. "Because it reminds me that what is essential is invisible to the eye." And Gabrielle understood. The cancer was visible. The pain was visible. Death was visible. But Beatrice's soul, that part that was still a ballerina, that part that still wanted to see herself as beautiful, that part that still needed someone to see her as human, that was invisible. And Lola saw it every morning with a silver brush and a worn book. Lola began to read. Chapter 3, where the little prince talks about his rose, about how to care for it, about how to protect it, about how to love it. Not because it's perfect, but because it's his. And Beatrice listened, with her eyes closed, breathing slowly in peace, and Gabrielle realized something. Beatrice wasn't asking for less morphine because the pain had lessened. Cancer doesn't forgive. The pain remains the same. Beatrice was asking for less morphine because she had something stronger than morphine. She had someone who made her feel alive, and the pain of feeling invisible hurt more than the cancer. But when Lola arrived each morning, that pain disappeared, and the other pain, the physical one, became more bearable, because a healthy soul helps the body to resist. Lola read for 20 minutes, until Beatrice fell asleep, gently, peacefully, with an expression that Gabrielle hadn't seen on her face in months. Peace. Lola closed the book, stood up, straightened Beatrice's sheets, left the glass of water on the bedside table, turned off the main light, and left only the dim lamp on, and she left the room. Gabrielle followed her. They went down to the kitchen, and there, standing by the stove while Lola made tea, Gabrielle asked the question that had been killing her since yesterday. "Why do you do this?" Lola didn't respond immediately. She poured 2 cups of tea, passed one to Gabrielle, sat down, and began to speak. "My mother died 8 years ago. Breast cancer. I worked at County General Hospital. Palliative care. I knew what was coming. I knew there was no cure, but I thought I could control how she died. Give her dignity, because I was a nurse. I knew." Lola stopped, took a breath. Gabrielle waited, but I was wrong. "The hospital system doesn't let you give dignity. It lets you give medicine, medication every 4 hours, monitoring every 2, changing sheets every day, everything protocolized, everything efficient. But no one has time to sit and brush an old woman's hair. That's not in the protocol." Lola looked at her teacup. Her eyes shone. "And I was so busy with 40 other patients that I didn't realize my own mother spent her last 3 weeks with her hair unwashed, tangled, lying on the pillow as if it didn't matter anymore. And she was always vain about her hair, always. But no one took the time, not even me." A tear fell into Lola's tea. She didn't wipe it away. She just kept talking. "The day she died, I was left alone with her body, and the first thing I did was grab a brush, this brush, and I brushed her hair for 40 minutes, until it looked like she would have wanted it to. And while I was brushing, I apologized to her. I promised her that I would never see that indignity in anyone else again. That's why I quit the hospital. That's why I became a housekeeper, because here I choose who to care for, and I choose how to care, without protocols, without bosses telling me there's no time. And when I saw your ad looking for someone to care for your terminal aunt, I knew it was my opportunity to keep that promise." Lola raised her head, looked Gabrielle directly in the eyes. "Your Aunt Beatrice reminds me of my mother, vain, proud of her beauty. and the cancer took that away from her. But I can give her a little bit back. Every morning. I can't cure her, no one can, but I can make her feel beautiful for one more hour before she dies. And that, Mrs. Sterling, is worth more than any salary." Gabrielle couldn't hold back the tears. She cried there in front of her housekeeper like she hadn't cried in years. She cried for Beatrice. She cried for Lola's mother. She cried for herself, and for all the time she had wasted thinking that money solved everything. And when she could speak, she only said 3 words: "Teach me, please." And here, 40% into this story, appears the second object, the second detail that will break your heart. Lola led Gabrielle back to Beatrice's room. Beatrice was still asleep, and Lola showed her something that Gabrielle had never seen: the pillow. Beatrice's pillow was covered with a clean pillowcase, but under that pillowcase, Lola kept something, and she took it out. Hair. Strands of grayish-black hair, carefully collected, stored in small fabric bags, with handwritten dates: June 1st, June 15th, July 3rd, July 20th. Every morning when Lola brushed Beatrice's hair, she collected the hair that fell out, and she saved it. She didn't throw it away like garbage. She kept it with respect. "Why do you keep this?" Gabrielle whispered. "Because it's part of her, and it deserves respect. It doesn't matter that it's falling out. It's hers. It's Beatrice." And Gabrielle, looking at those small fabric bags with written dates, understood something that she had never understood before. Loving someone isn't avoiding their pain. It's being present in their pain. And Lola was present, every morning, in Beatrice's most intimate pain. The pain of losing her identity, strand by strand. But Lola didn't run away. She collected each strand with dignity, as if to say, "This is also Beatrice, and Beatrice matters," until the end. That afternoon, after Lola left at 6, Gabrielle stayed. She cancelled her meetings again, something that was becoming a habit, and she sat by Beatrice's bed, awake now, looking at her with those tired but lucid eyes. "How are you, Aunt?" Beatrice smiled weakly. "Better now that you're really here." And Gabrielle knew what she meant. Being there for real wasn't the same as being there physically for 20 minutes every Sunday. Being there for real was staying, even if it hurt, even if it was uncomfortable, even if you didn't know what to say, just being. Gabrielle took Beatrice's hand, fragile, bone-thin, but warm, still alive. And for the first time in 3 months, instead of asking, "How are you?" and expecting a polite, "I'm fine," Gabrielle asked something real. "Are you afraid?" Beatrice thought about it. Then she nodded. "Yes, every day." "What are you afraid of?" "Of dying ugly, of being remembered like this, like a sick body, not as Beatrice." Gabrielle squeezed her hand. "You're not going to die ugly. Lola won't let it happen, and neither will I." Beatrice wept. Silent tears streamed down her sunken cheeks. "Thank you for staying." Finally, and Gabrielle stayed, that afternoon, that night, and the next 6 nights, because Beatrice didn't have 3 months, not anymore. The doctor called the next day, 2 weeks, maybe less. The cancer was moving fast now. It was a matter of days, and Gabrielle wasn't going to waste a single one. The next 6 days changed Gabrielle Sterling in ways that 15 years as CEO never could. Day 1. Gabrielle arrived at 5 a.m., just like Lola, and Lola taught her step by step how to heat the water, not boiling, lukewarm. Test it with your elbow, like mothers do with babies. How to apply the shampoo, circular motions, gentle, without pulling. How to rinse 3 times until the water runs completely clear. And most importantly, how to hold the mirror, not just put it in front of her. Hold it with love, with a steady hand so it doesn't tremble, at the right height, with the right light. And while you're holding it, say something, not an empty compliment, something true. Look how beautiful you look. Mrs. Sterling, your eyes are still shining. Your smile is still the same as when you danced at the Lincoln Center." And Beatrice, looking at herself in that mirror held by the trembling hands of her niece, smiled. Not much. She couldn't, but she smiled. And Gabriel felt something she had never felt in any business meeting or closing any multi-million-dollar deal. She felt like she mattered, really mattered, not because of her money, not because of her title, but because she was there, present, human. Day 2. Beatrice got worse. The pain became more intense. The pills weren't working as well anymore. The morphine dose was increased. And Beatrice started sleeping more. 18 hours a day, waking up only for brief moments. But every time she woke up, Lola or Gabrielle was there, holding her hand, singing softly, reading, even if Beatrice had her eyes closed, because being present doesn't require the other person to be awake. It only requires you to be there. Day 3. The moment Gabrielle had been dreading arrived. Beatrice stopped eating, completely, not even water. Her body began to shut down. The doctors called it the active process of dying. The body knows when it's time and starts shutting down systems, one by one. Lola pulled Gabrielle aside. She explained with that calm voice she had used with 40 terminal patients before. This is normal. It's her body telling her it's time to rest. We can't force her to eat. We can only keep her comfortable, dignified, and accompanied. How long? Gabrielle asked, her voice breaking. Days, maybe hours. No one knows exactly, but soon. And Gabrielle, for the first time in her adult life, didn't try to control anything. She didn't call more doctors. She didn't ask for second opinions. She didn't look for last-minute miracles. She just accepted it and stayed. Day 4. Beatrice barely woke up. Her breathing had become irregular, slow, with long pauses between each breath that made Gabrielle hold her own, waiting for the next. But even so, that morning at 5 a.m., Lola combed her hair. Even though Beatrice was unconscious, even though she wasn't going to see her reflection, even though it seemed pointless, Lola dampened that thinning hair, washed it with lavender shampoo, combed it with the silver brush, strand by strand, as if Beatrice were awake and watching. "Why are you doing this if she's not awake?" Gabrielle asked softly. Lola didn't stop combing. Because she deserves it, awake or asleep, alive or dying. Beatrice Sterling deserves to be treated with dignity until the very last second, and Gabrielle understood something profound, something that changed her entire concept of humanity. Dignity doesn't depend on whether the person is conscious. Dignity is what you do when no one is watching you, when no one can thank you, when the only thing that motivates you is respect for human life. And Lola had that, in every fiber of her being. Day 5. Gabrielle woke up at 3 a.m. with a feeling in her chest, something that said, "Get up, go to her, now." She got up, got dressed, drove to the house, arrived at 3:40 a.m. The house was silent. She went upstairs, and the light in Beatrice's room was on. She opened the door softly, and there was Lola, sitting in the chair next to the bed, holding Beatrice's hand, singing, so softly that it was barely audible. But it was the Nutcracker, always the Nutcracker. "How long have you been here?" Lola didn't turn around. "Since 11 p.m., I felt that tonight was important. I didn't want her to be alone. We don't pay you to stay overnight." "I know. Then why?" And Lola, for the first time, turned to look at Gabrielle, and her eyes were full of tears, but her voice was firm. "Because when my mother died, she died alone. I arrived 20 minutes late. And I've wondered every day for the last 8 years if she was afraid in those last 20 minutes, if she looked for me, if she wanted to tell me something and I wasn't there to listen, and I'm never going to know. But I can make sure that your aunt doesn't have that fear, that she doesn't die alone. Even if I have to stay awake for 48 hours, she's not going to be alone. Gabriel sat down on the other side of the bed, took Beatrice's other hand, and together, the CEO and the housekeeper stayed there, singing softly, holding hands, waiting. Day 6. Dawn broke. Beatrice was still alive, but barely. Her breathing was a whisper, her skin cold, her lips bluish. Lola and Gabriel hadn't moved. They hadn't slept, just short 10-minute naps, taking turns. But always one of them awake, always someone holding her hand. At 9 a.m., Lola whispered to Gabriel, "I'm going to comb her hair one last time." Gabriel nodded and watched Lola do what she had done for 3 months. But this time, knowing it was the last, Lola warmed the water, dampened her hair, applied the shampoo, massaged her scalp as carefully as if Beatrice were made of glass, rinsed 3 times, dried with a warm towel, and took the silver brush. And while she combed, she sang, "The Nutcracker," complete, from the beginning. And Gabrielle, watching that scene, knew that this was what she had come to see. This was what she had failed to see for 3 months. Love, not the love from movies, not the love from songs. Real love, the kind that stays when there's no hope, the kind that serves when there's no reward. What follows is what happens when death has already won. The love that says your life mattered and you deserve beauty until the very end. Lola finished combing her hair. She put the brush away in the blue silk scarf and whispered something to Beatrice that Gabriel barely caught. "You can rest now, Miss Beatrice. You've done enough. You were beautiful. You were loved. And we will never forget you." And at exactly 11:23 in the morning, Beatrice Sterling took her last breath. There was no drama, no shouting, no visible pain, just one final sigh and silence. And Gabriel, holding that hand that no longer squeezed back, cried like never before in her life. She cried for her aunt. She cried for all the years she lost. She cried for the 20 minutes on Sundays when she could have given hours. But she also cried with gratitude, because in the end, thanks to Lola, Beatrice didn't die alone. She didn't die looking uncared for. She wasn't forgotten. She died with her hair done, dignified, loved. And here, exactly 55% into this story, comes the moment that defines everything. The moment that's going to be in the thumbnail. The moment you will never forget. 2 hours after Beatrice died, the funeral team arrived. But before they touched the body, Lola stopped them. "Give me 30 minutes. "For what?" asked the funeral director. "To make her beautiful." And during the next 30 minutes, Gabrielle saw something she would never forget. Lola dressed Beatrice in her favorite dress, the black one with lace, the one she had worn in her last performance as a principal dancer 18 years ago. Gabrielle had kept it in the closet but never thought to use it. Lola put on her pearl necklace, the one her grandmother had given her, the one Beatrice wore only on special occasions. And then, most importantly, Lola took all the little cloth bags, the ones that held the hair that had fallen out over 3 months. And with an artist's patience, with a mother's love, she did something impossible, a braid. She wove the fallen hair with the hair that remained, strand by strand, creating an elaborate braid that ran across Beatrice's head like a crown. It didn't cover the baldness. It didn't pretend to hide the illness, but it restored some of the dignity that the cancer tried to steal. And when she finished, Lola stepped back, and Gabriel saw her aunt for the last time. Beatrice Sterling, 68 years old, dancer, elegant, beautiful, not as a cancer patient, as Beatrice. And the funeral director, a man of 60 who had seen 1,000 bodies in his career, stood still, just looking. And then he said something that broke Gabrielle. "In 35 years of doing this, I've never seen anyone prepare a loved one with so much love. Whoever did this really loved her." And Gabrielle, watching Lola put away the silver brush, said the truth that pained her to admit. "I'm not the one who loved her like that. She is, and I'm learning." If this story hasn't made you feel anything so far, if it hasn't broken you inside, if it hasn't made you think about every person you love and every second you waste, then I'll tell you straight, you don't have a soul. Or you have it so buried under work and routine that you forgot it exists, because this isn't fiction. This happens every day. People dying alone, people dying without dignity. While we're busy with meetings and emails and things that don't matter a damn when you're taking your last breath, and if there's a Lola in your life, someone who cares for the people you love with that kind of love, thank them now, today. Because people like that don't exist to make money. They exist to save us from our own indifferent cruelty. The funeral was 3 days later, open casket, at Gabrielle's request, because she wanted everyone to see what she almost missed. Beatrice Sterling, not destroyed by cancer, but honored despite the cancer. 150 people arrived, ballet colleagues from 20 years ago, students Beatrice had trained, neighbors, friends, and when they saw the body, everyone had the same reaction. Awe. She looks beautiful, they said. Like she's sleeping, like she's still Beatrice. And Gabrielle, standing beside the casket with Lola at her side, explained, "This is Lola, our housekeeper. She cared for my aunt for 3 months. She combed her hair every morning. She restored her dignity when we all forgot she needed it. And what you see now, that braid, that dress, that peace on her face, is Lola's work, not mine." And one by one, the attendees approached Lola. They thanked her. Some cried. Others just nodded with deep respect. But there was one woman, Isabel Romero. She had been Beatrice's student 25 years ago. And after the funeral, she approached Gabrielle with a question. "Does your housekeeper accept other jobs? My mother has dementia. She lives with me, but I don't know how to care for her with the love that your Lola cared for Miss Beatrice." And there, 70% into this story, Gabrielle had an idea that didn't come from the CEO. It came from the niece who had just lost her aunt, but learned a lesson that no business school teaches. That there are things more important than success, and one of them is dignity. Gabrielle looked at Lola. "Lola, do you have time to teach other people what you do?" Lola thought, then nodded slowly. "If that helps more people die like Miss Beatrice, with dignity, then yes." And Gabrielle, right there, standing in the cemetery, made a decision that would change hundreds of lives. "I'm going to create a program. It's going to be called Dignity Beatrice. And you're going to run it. We're going to train caregivers, not just in medical protocols, in love, in how to comb hair, in how to read, in how to make someone feel human until the very last second. Do you accept?" Lola, with tears running down her face, nodded. And 3 months later, the Dignity Beatrice program opened its doors. But that comes later. Because now, standing in that cemetery, as they lowered Beatrice's casket into the ground, Gabrielle needed to do something else. She knelt down, put her hand on the casket, and whispered what she should have said 3 months ago. "Thank you, Aunt, for raising me when my parents died, for sacrificing your career to give me a life, for loving me when I was too blind to see your love. And I'm sorry for not being present until it was almost too late. But I learned. Thanks to Lola, I learned, and I'm going to honor you, not with flowers once a year, but with actions every day, helping other people die like you, with dignity, with love, beautiful until the end." And as the earth fell on the casket, Gabrielle felt something break inside her, but it wasn't something bad. It was the old Gabrielle, the CEO who measured everything in dollars and minutes, the one who believed that success was accumulating sterling hotels and bank accounts, the one who thought 20 minutes on Sundays was enough for someone who literally raised you. That Gabrielle died that day, buried alongside Beatrice, and a new one was born. One who understood that time given with love is worth more than money earned through toil. That dignity is a right, not a luxury, and that real heroes don't wear designer suits. They wear blue uniforms. They arrive an hour early, and they bring silver brushes in silk handkerchiefs. 3 months after the funeral, the Beatrice Dignity Program opened in a small building in Beverly Hills. Gabrielle had bought the place with her own money, not from Sterling Hotels, from her personal account, because this wasn't a business, it was a debt. The program was simple, to train caregivers in what Lola called care with love, not just medical protocols, not just changing diapers and giving medicine, but how to make someone feel human when their body is betraying them. Lola designed the curriculum, 4 weeks, 120 hours, and each student had to learn 5 fundamental things. 1, how to comb hair, not quickly, with patience, strand by strand, as if each strand mattered, because it does matter. For the person in the bed, it's their identity, and to snatch that away from them just because they're sick is cruelty disguised as efficiency. 2, how to read, not like a robot, with emotion, with different voices for the characters, with pauses in the right moments, because when you're stuck in bed, a well-read story is a window to the world. And to close that window with monotonous reading is to take away the last freedom they have. 3, how to hold a mirror. This was what surprised the students the most. Why dedicate an entire class to holding a mirror? Because holding it wrong means the person sees their face trembling, sees your discomfort and sees that you don't want to be there, but holding it steady, at the right height with the right light, while saying something true and kind, that gives them back something the hospital took away: dignity. 4, how to listen, not waiting for your turn to speak. Really listen, because sometimes what a dying person needs isn't for you to tell them that everything's going to be okay. They need you to listen when they say, "I'm afraid." And instead of changing the subject, take their hand and say, "I know, and it's not fair, but you're not alone in that fear." And 5, the hardest thing, how to be present when there is no hope. Because the human instinct is to run from pain. Seeing someone dying hurts, so we create distance. We become mechanical, efficient, protocol-driven, to protect ourselves. But that person needs the opposite. They need you to get closer when your whole body is telling you to stay away. To cry with them instead of saying, "Don't cry." To accept that they're going to die instead of selling false hopes. And to keep caring for them with love until the last second, even though you know that last second is near. Lola taught this with the intensity of someone who had learned from her own failure, and her students came out changed. The first group graduated in December, 12 caregivers, 8 women, 4 men, between 25 and 62 years old, some with medical experience, others with none, but all with something in common. They had cared for someone, and they hadn't done it well, and they lived with that guilt, and they wanted to learn to do it better for the next person. One of them was Teresa Montes, 45 years old. She had cared for her father with Alzheimer's for 2 years, and when he died, the only thing Teresa remembered was the day she lost her patience. She yelled at him because he asked her name for the 100th time that day, and that was the last conscious conversation they had. An hour later, he went into a coma. He died 3 days later without waking up. And Teresa lived with the weight that her last words to her father were a shout of frustration. Lola hugged her when Teresa told that story on the first day of class, and she said something to her that Teresa never forgot. You can't change those last words, but you can make sure that the next person you care for hears love instead of frustration. And that way, you honor your father, not with regrets, with actions. And Teresa became one of the best caregivers in the program because she knew the cost of failing. In its first year, the Beatrice Dignity Program trained 50 caregivers, and each of those caregivers was assigned to families who needed them. Some paid, others couldn't pay. It didn't matter. Gabrielle subsidized those who couldn't pay with her own resources, and the results were impactful. In normal hospitals, 68% of terminally ill patients die alone in the early hours of the morning when the nurses are busy with other patients. when the family has gone home to rest alone. But of the 50 patients cared for by graduates of Beatrice Dignity that first year, 0 died alone. 0. Not because the program guaranteed 24-hour surveillance, but because the caregivers learned to listen. And when a person is close to death, they emit signals, subtle ones. A change in breathing, a restlessness, a sudden lucidity after days of being unconscious. And the Beatrice Dignity caregivers knew how to read those signals, and they stayed. They cancelled their day off. They slept in uncomfortable chairs, whatever it took, because they had learned from Lola that being present in that last moment wasn't optional. It was sacred, and here, 80% into this story, the final object appears. The detail that closes everything. Gabrielle had kept something of Beatrice's, something that no one knew she had, and 2 years after Beatrice's death, she took it out at a moment when she needed it. It was one of the little cloth bags, the last one, dated August 25th, the day before Beatrice died, the last hair that Lola combed while Beatrice was still breathing. Gabrielle had kept it in a drawer of her desk, in the Sterling Hotel's CEO's office, and every time she was about to make a business decision that sacrificed people for profits, she opened that drawer. She looked at that little cloth bag, and she remembered. She remembered that her aunt had lost strands of hair, but Lola kept them with dignity, not as garbage, as treasure, because they were part of Beatrice, and Beatrice mattered. And if Beatrice mattered, if her fallen hair deserved respect, if her dignity was worth more than efficiency, then every employee in her hotels mattered, every guest mattered, every decision she made had to pass that test. Does this treat people with dignity, or does it treat them like numbers? And if the answer was numbers, Gabrielle changed the decision. That little piece of hair in a cloth bag had changed how Gabrielle ran an empire of 12 hotels and 3,000 employees. Because dignity is non-negotiable, not even for profits. And here, 85% into this story, I have to tell you something. And it's not comfortable, but it's necessary. This story is going to end in a few minutes. You're going to go back to your life, to your job, to your routines, and there's a very real possibility that you'll forget all of this in a week, because it's easy to feel in the moment. It's difficult to act afterward. But if there's even just one person in your life who is suffering, sick, alone, forgotten, and you've been putting off visiting them because it's uncomfortable or painful, or you just don't have the time, this story is shouting at you. Go, now, today, not tomorrow, because tomorrow they may no longer be there, and you'll live with the same weight that Teresa lived with, the weight of knowing you could have given love, and you chose to give excuses. So don't just feel this, act. And if this story moved you so much that you want to do something bigger, support this work. Super Thanks exists for a reason. So stories like this keep reaching people who need to hear them. Like you, like me. 2 years after Beatrice's death, the Beatrice Dignity program had grown exponentially. 127 trained caregivers, 340 families served, 89 patients had passed away under the care of program graduates, and all 89 died accompanied. Hair combed, with music, with someone holding their hand, and something else. Something Gabrielle hadn't expected. Families started to donate, not money, time. Children who had lost their parents volunteered to accompany other elderly people who didn't have family, to read to them, to comb their hair, to simply be there. Because when you see someone die with dignity, you want others to have that same dignity. And the only way to guarantee it is by giving it yourself. The program became a movement, and Gabrielle, without planning it, became a spokesperson for something bigger than just hotels. She became a spokesperson for a simple, yet revolutionary idea, that how you die matters, and that as a society, we've failed to honor that truth. Gabrielle started giving talks at hospitals, at nursing schools, at business conferences, and her message was always the same. You want to know the secret to success? I was CEO of 12 hotels, $340 million a year. I thought that was success, and I was wrong. You know what real success is? Seeing someone die in peace, hair combed, accompanied, loved. That is success, because when you die, the only thing that will matter isn't how much you earned. It's how you treated those who couldn't give you anything in return. And one night, after one of those talks, a man approached her. Dr. Eduardo Salinas, head of palliative care at the ABC hospital, and he asked her a question that would change everything again. Can your program scale? Can it train hundreds, thousands? Gabrielle thought about it. Then she told the truth. I don't know, but Lola does. And 3 months later, Beatrice Dignity signed an agreement with ABC Hospital, the first hospital in Mexico to officially integrate the loving care protocol into its palliative department. Lola trained 30 nurses, and those 30 nurses trained another 100, and those 100 changed how the entire hospital treated terminally ill patients. From cold protocols to warm presence, from mechanical efficiency to intentional dignity, and the numbers backed it up. Family satisfaction went up 340%, complaints went down 78%, and something that can't be measured in numbers, but that everyone felt. The hospital started to feel less like a death factory and more like a farewell sanctuary. Lola became respected in the medical field, not for having titles, not for having years of formal experience, but for having something that the doctors had lost in years of medical school: humanity. And Lola never lost that humility. She still arrived at the program every morning at 5 a.m., an hour early, as always, because that's who she was. Not a title, not a position, an act of service. Gabrielle changed too, but not just in her work, in her whole life. She reduced her workload as CEO of Sterling Hotels to 50%, hired a co-CEO, and dedicated the other 50% to Beatrice Dignity, because she'd learned something that no business school teaches, that you can be successful in business and fail in life, and that the real balance isn't work life, it's impact emptiness. Does your life leave an impact, or does it just leave emptiness? And Gabrielle chose impact. 3 years after Beatrice's death, Gabrielle visited her grave, like she did every month. She brought flowers, gardenias, Beatrice's favorites, and she told the headstone what had happened. Aunt Beatrice, the program has now trained 340 caregivers. We've served 890 families, 267 people have died under our care, and none of them died alone. None of them died without dignity. They were all combed, accompanied, loved, like you were. And all of this exists because Lola loved you, and because I finally learned to see what she saw. Gabrielle stayed there sitting for 40 minutes, not 20, 40, because she had learned to give time, not to manage it. And while she was there, someone else arrived. A woman Gabrielle didn't know, older, maybe 70 years old. She walked slowly with a cane. She approached another grave, 2 rows over, and Gabrielle saw that she had something in her hand, a brush, old, with a worn wooden handle, and the woman knelt down, placed the brush on the grave, and whispered something that Gabrielle barely managed to hear. Thank you, daughter, for combing my hair every day when the cancer took away my strength. I never told you enough, but I'm telling you now, thank you. And Gabrielle understood. That woman didn't have cancer. She had survived, and she was visiting the grave of her daughter who had taken care of her. And the brush was the symbol of that care. And Gabrielle cried, because there were 2 types of people in the world: those who left brushes on graves, and those who left excuses. And thanks to Beatrice, thanks to Lola, Gabrielle had learned to be in the first group. And here, 95% through this story, comes the final phrase: The one you're going to remember, the one that defines everything. Lola never stopped carrying her mother's silver brush. The one that belonged to her mother. She kept it in a blue silk scarf. And every time she trained a new group of caregivers, she took it out and she told them the story of her mother, of the unwashed hair, of the 40 minutes combing a lifeless body, of the promise. And then she asked them something. What are you going to leave behind when you die? A brush that someone remembers with love, or an emptiness that no one notices? Because, in the end, it doesn't matter how much money you make, how many titles you have, how many accomplishments you accumulate. The only thing that matters is if you treated someone with dignity when they had no power to give it back to you. That's the real measure of a life, not what you take, what you give. And Lola gave dignity every morning, with a silver brush and a love that didn't expect reward. And she changed hundreds of lives, including Gabrielle's, including mine, by telling you this, and maybe, if you let it, including yours. Today, 5 years after Beatrice's death, the Beatrice Dignity Program operates in 12 cities in Mexico. It has trained over 2,000 caregivers. It has served over 8,000 families. And it's changed the palliative care protocol in 47 hospitals. And it all started with a 52-year-old woman who arrived an hour early, without anyone asking her to, without charging a single dollar extra. Just because someone deserved dignity, Gabrielle is still CEO, but no longer of 12 hotels, of 18. Sterling Hotels has grown, but it's grown differently, with policies that prioritize dignity over efficiency. When the two conflict, with paid leave for employees who need to care for sick family members, with mandatory empathy training for all managers, because Gabrielle learned that business without humanity isn't success, it's elegant exploitation. And Lola is still Lola, humble, dedicated, arriving early, with her silver brush in her blue scarf. But now, thousands of caregivers carry their own brushes, with their own stories, honoring their own promises. And every time one of those caregivers combs a terminal patient with love and patience, every time they hold a mirror with steady hands and say something true, every time they stay an hour extra without pay, because they feel that night is important. Beatrice Mendoza lives, not in the body that cancer destroyed, in the legacy that her death inspired. And that's what they call a small miracle. Not that she survived, but that her dignified death saved thousands of other deaths from being undignified. And now you have a decision, two options, and clear, with no room for excuses. Option 1, you close this. You go on with your day. You feel something for 10 minutes, and you forget it. And the next time someone you love is suffering, you find an excuse. I'm busy. It's uncomfortable. I don't know what to say. And when that person dies, you live with the weight that you could have been present, and you chose to be absent. Option 2, you act. Today, now. You call that person who's lonely. You visit that family member in the hospital. You offer to help that neighbor who's sick. And even if it's uncomfortable, even if you don't know what to say, even if you can only give 20 minutes, you give them with real presence, not with guilty distraction. And if you can give more, if this story broke you like it broke me, do something big, donate, volunteer, learn. Become someone who cares with dignity, because the world needs more Lolas and fewer Gabrielles who wake up late. Which do you choose? Because your life is the sum of your choices, and someday, someone is going to be choosing whether to care for you with dignity or with indifference, and that someone is going to remember how you treated others, and they're going to give you what you gave. So choose well, because that choice defines not only this story, it defines yours. Lola's silver brush is now kept in the Beatrice Dignity Museum, behind glass, with a plaque that says, "This brush combed 2 dying women and saved thousands more from dying without dignity." Simple objects used with love change the world, and every graduate of the program passes through that museum on their last day of training. They look at that brush, and Lola tells them the same thing she told the first group. You don't need to be rich. You don't need to be a doctor. You don't need to be special. You only need to be human and decide that dignity is non-negotiable and that you're going to give it, even if no one asks you to, even if no one pays you, even if no one thanks you, because it's the right thing to do, and because someday you're going to be in that bed, and you're going to want someone like you to be there, caring for you, combing your hair, reminding you that you're still human, even if your body says otherwise. And then you'll understand what Beatrice understood in her last days. That angels exist, but they don't have wings. They have blue uniforms, and they arrive an hour early, and they bring silver brushes, kept with love. That's the truth. The only truth that matters when you reach the end. That you were loved, that you were seen, and that someone took the time, when time was the most valuable thing they had, to make you feel human. Beatrice had that, thanks to Lola, thanks to Gabriel, who finally woke up, thanks to a silver brush and an hour given each morning. And the question I leave you with is simple but devastating. When you die, who's going to comb your hair with love? And more importantly, who have you combed? Because that's the only story that matters. The story of love given when there was no hope left. The story of dignity offered when the world had forgotten it. The story of a silver brush that changed everything because someone decided that a life, any life, deserves beauty until the end. And if you haven't lived that story yet, start today, because tomorrow someone you love might not be there. And you're going to wish you had been there, Lola, before it's too late, before the only thing you can do is comb a lifeless body and wonder why you waited so long. Don't wait. Go, now. And be the person that someone is going to remember with tears of gratitude instead of regrets of missed opportunities. Because that's the story you want to leave. The story of love that arrived early and stayed until the end, like Lola, like Gabriel learned to be, like you can choose to be today. The decision is yours, but the clock doesn't wait, and the people you love don't either. So close this and go to whoever needs to see you, with a brush or without one, with words or without them, but with presence, real, complete, without distractions. And when that person looks at you and smiles, even if it's small, even if it's fragile, you're going to understand what Lola always knew, that this is what we exist for, not to accumulate, to give, not to succeed, to serve, not to be remembered, to make others feel seen. And that's the only success that survives death. The love you gave when no one forced you to, the dignity you defended when it was easier to ignore it, the time you gave when it was the most valuable thing you had. That's what remains. When everything else is gone, a silver brush, an hour early, and a love that expected nothing in return. That's the story of Beatrice, of Lola, of Gabriel. And if you choose well, it can be yours too. Now go and be worthy of the story you want to leave.